From some smoke. Doesn't get prettier than that.
I don't remember it.
And a one-hand effort by Harris. And Harris stabs it.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back. It is the Print Factory College Football Show. We're here giving you the college football winners for whatever week we're in. Week 7, at least, I think it says up here. So week 7, we're getting deep into the season, and this is the week. Now, the main slate doesn't have the big games, but the night slate's going to be incredible. Bruce will have the playbook for that. We were talking about that pre-show. So a lot of big games. I know his team is on the main slate playing Oklahoma, so that'll be a big game, but Bruce, this is one of the weekends. I think you're pretty stoked for it. So why don't you tell the people how excited you are to be here?
Yeah, it's a very, very huge week. We have just so many good games. I mean, they don't even have to be great for DFS. I mean, you'll be sitting around the TV watching all these. Pitt, Cal, it's going to be great. Texas, Oklahoma is always great. Even if Oklahoma isn't that great this year, it's going to be a fun game. Then this night slate is nuts with Oregon and Ohio State. We even have on the late slate, we have Kansas State and Colorado too. So, man, it's very exciting. It's going to be a fun day. Just be prepared to be parked by the TV all day for sure.
Yeah, I'm ready for it. This is definitely a day to have a couple TVs too. I don't think you just want one loaded up. So excited to watch all the games though. Bryce, I'm sure you've looked at the schedule, not just the main slate. The night slate's insane. So this is one of the bigger weekends for sure. But how's it going over there?
Yeah, we're getting into the meat of the college football season now, where it's like you kind of know who the good teams are, who the bad teams are, and we finally get some good games. I don't know if any of them will rival Alabama, Georgia, but it's a super loaded day. So yeah, fire up all the slates. We have you covered here. Got bets for all the games as well. So it's definitely a TV type of weekend.
Yeah, it'll be a good time. I'm excited for it. Sure, you guys are too, since you're here, because you're here for some college football takes. If you guys could please hit the like, we would appreciate it. And let's dive in and talk about this slate. I got SaberSim up. They got all the teams correct. I don't have the NC Dinos and all these crazy stuff hanging in on Saber. So that's good. We got the right logos on all the teams here. And we're going to talk about each game. And the first game up, it's not a super appealing one. It's Wisconsin and it's Rutgers. And it's about like a 45 total here. And Rutgers has plays, right? Kyle Monaghan, he is 7.6K. Definitely not a terrible option, but I just don't know if it's the right use of salary on this slate. That's kind of one of the concerns with him. Tyree Walker, he is definitely cheap at 5.3K. He was great value last week, and I expect he'll be another good value here. We got Will Pauling at 4.2K, which seems crazy. Demir Miller, he's been a great value throughout the season at 4.3K. So there are plays here. Obviously, I don't think it's a game stack spot, but Bruce, I think there are plays that we have to discuss. So talk about this 45.5 total.
Yeah, I agree. It's super cheap, but for a reason. I think the game's going to be kind of slower. Wisconsin's kind of middle of the road with pace, but yeah, it's the game isn't going to be great. I don't like either quarterback really. The Nunn guy you can always play just because he's going to get all the carries, 23 carries per game. Tui Walker scored 3 touchdowns last week, but they did play this backup guy like 29% of the snaps. So, it's kind of a thing where he could have easily scored 1 or 2 of those, and Walker didn't get there all the way. But he still is cheap at 5,300. The backup is 3K, so I don't hate him either. Darian Dupree, he looked pretty good in limited action. But yeah, Walker is okay if you want to play him. Rutgers is, usually they've been good on defense, but they've had issues with the run a little bit. this year. Their defensive line is really bad. They've been giving up 26 points per game to running backs this year. So I don't mind Walker or Dupree if you're going to play them. And then Monungai at home is always in play. But other than that, the receivers, Miller, like you said, is okay. But Pauling kind of got banged up last game, so I don't know how good he is to go here. But if he is, he's not bad value if you need it.
All right, Bryce, I believe you liked Walker last week as a value, or the week before. I forget. We talked about him. I remember you being higher on him. Is he someone you're going to be high on here on this week? Obviously, it's a loaded slate, a lot of good plays, a lot of good totals, but this is a low one here, but some good value. What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, Walker seems like clearly the best play in this game to me. Only 5.3K. He didn't get a price bump from last week. Kind of has a crappy game environment. But, yeah, I mean, he's still super cheap, at a week where you do want to pay up for, I think, at least one running back spot. Monungai kind of gets shoved to the side here for me just because, like, there's three guys I really want to get up to at running back, and he's just not quite one of them. Like, he would still make my tournament pools for sure. I mean, he can get there on volume alone, but I think it's going to be a pretty ugly game, and I'm pretty much fading the rest of it. Bruce mentioned Pauling. He did get banged up last week. He's the type of guy I would leave in my tournament pool, but I think there's better plays for cheap at receiver, or if you just spend up a bit. So I'm likely not going to be on him much this weekend. Walker did split some carries last week, but I think Yakimelli got more run with the blowout. So, I'm kind of expecting the backfield to be a pretty solid Walker split in competitive games.
Yeah, definitely a game we have to like a little bit. But I'm not loading the boat, right? Like if I run Sabre tomorrow and I see myself getting like 80% Walker, I'm definitely going to adjust that. I want exposure to this game, and maybe it's a game too to like, hey, just get one piece of, when I don't want like two pieces of each side. There's some good games that we're going to talk about. So let's go to the next game. And it feels very similar to the game we just talked about, where it has plays we're going to like. It's a low total. It's Iowa and it's Washington, 45 total, but we kind of want the expensive guys, I think, a little bit, or at least those are the guys that I'm looking at. Like, for instance, I would like Caleb Johnson. Now, will I play him versus some of these other running backs that we're going to get to? Probably not, but he can break a slate, right? I mean, it's just simple. He has the ability to break a slate, and I don't think he's a bad play in tournaments at low ownership. Same with Denzel Boston. The problem with Boston is it's getting expensive. Now he's 7.7K. Like, before that, he was in that 5K range, 6K. 7.7 is pricey for a matchup against Iowa. I know we did see the Ohio State receivers absolutely crush against Iowa, but Ohio State is a different animal than Washington. So don't know exactly what I'm doing with those plays, but I think those two plays are in play in tournaments. They have the ability to break a slate. So I think they're in the conversation as low owned plays. And then I'm sure Bruce will talk about, Nick Lachey's brother, Luke Lachey, for us, because why not at 3.3K? He loves his tight end. So Bruce, talk about the plays in this game.
Yeah, Iowa's another defense, kind of like Rutgers, that they've been kind of bad against good offenses. Washington has kind of looked sneaky good too on offense. Their offensive line is blocking really well, and Denzel Boston is priced up, so it is very tough to play him at that price. But he does have 8 receiving touchdowns this year. You've kind of been the go-to guy there, along with Giles Jackson. So I don't mind him in tournaments, but it is at Iowa, and Iowa notoriously plays well there, so it's tough to pay that. Lachey is a good value, like you mentioned. Their backup tight end is out. Ostrangia, he's out as well, so should be a lot of Lachey there. Caleb Johnson, as you mentioned, is a good play, averaging 33 DraftKings points per game. He didn't have a big game against Ohio State, but that's Ohio State. So, I do like him at home here. He is priced up, but I don't mind him either in tournaments, along with Boston.
All right, Bryce, there's no way you're playing these guys in cash, I don't think, but maybe I'm wrong. I think tournaments, these guys make a ton of sense, but I just kind of want to get a piece here and there. And if I'm even playing one team, it's hard to click this game, but what's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, tournament sprinkles only for me. The pool would be Johnson, Coleman, and Boston. It's pretty much just kind of the spend ups here. Walker you can make a case for in other formats just because he's so cheap, but like you're not getting any sort of price break on these guys. And like there's some really nice totals to attack this week, and this just isn't one for me. So Boston's always playable in tournaments. Like, I mean, he has 8 receiving touchdowns this year. It's not like there's not like a Trey Harris that I like really want on this slate at receiver either. So I think he would make some sense if you're trying to get different. Coleman and Johnson are, I think pretty talented backs that have volume. It's just a pretty tough environment for them. And, I think they're going to need probably, Coleman needs probably 25 and Johnson needs 30 to kind of get there with the other running backs this week. So, I mean, they can definitely do it here. I'm not sure how often of an outcome that is. It's probably like a 15% outcome. So yeah, I'd likely be under the field in tournaments, probably between 5 and 10% on all of these guys, and just kind of pass them the rest of the game.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. It's a game that I wouldn't hate getting exposure to, but again, like think about it. Like I'm not going to play Boston and Johnson, I think, together. Like it's more just, hey, last guy in, you have some really good values, and we'll talk about some really good games for sure. The next game we are going to talk about, that is definitely a really good game. And I'm excited to talk about it. It's Georgia Tech. It's UNC. You could argue this could be the game of the slate. I mean, you could definitely argue for other games for sure. And I wouldn't push back completely, but this could be the game. We know UNC's offense, they can put up points. I think I heard the other day during the game, I think they're averaging 50 a game before that Pittsburgh game, and their defense is horrendous. So obviously going to be a spot that we like a lot. Georgia Tech, it felt like they let down a little bit last week. And I mean, this is a great spot for them to absolutely just come in and smash. So of course, King at 8.1K, really good play at the quarterback position. We have to like him here. Criswell, he's the one that's never my favorite roster of quarterbacks, and he's 7.6K. It's like it's just easier to get the King, so you'll see him at lower ownership if you would like. Then we got Hampton, 8.9K, Haynes, 6K. These are 2 running back plays that I believe Bryce was talking about that'll have some interest in for sure on this slate. I don't know if it's the right ones, but we'll see. They've got to be in play, though, for tournaments, even in for cash games for me. And then the receivers. These receivers are going to absolutely project so well. Malik Rutherford, 18.36 on Sabre at 5.3K. You got Singleton. You got Nesbitt at 3.5K. I know he's going to grade out as a really strong value. I know Bruce Sibley has him graded now as a pretty strong value. So these are definitely going to be good plays that we are going to want to get to here on this slate. Bruce, we got value plays, we got spends. So how on earth are we like prioritizing these plays?
Yeah, it went poorly for me the first time I did it, but I'm going to have a lot of Jamal Haynes. I posted a quote from him from, I think it was ACC Media Day or something, where he said he had a vendetta against his ex-coach, who is now the DC of North Carolina. So he said he had a chip on his shoulder. There's some rumors that he tried to kick him off the team or something, and the current coach kept him there. So that's an interesting little revenge narrative there. He's only 6K, and he got 70% of snaps last week. I just think it's a smash spot for him against UNC as well, whose defensive line is horrible. They're giving up 29 points per game to running backs. I just think it's a great spot for him. You can always play Omarion Hampton as well, but he is almost 9K. They're going to run him no matter what. They just don't love Criswell's arm, and Criswell doesn't run very much either. But Haynes King is definitely in play. He projects really well. Probably too cheap for him. 4 rushing touchdowns on the year and 8 passing. Receivers, Nate McCollum is an ex Georgia Tech receiver, and he's 4,600. Had 13 targets last week, so maybe he's trending in the right direction. Started the season kind of slow, so I don't mind that. Maybe another revenge narrative on the other side. Like you said, Rutherford, Nesbitt are both great. Singleton in a solid spot here. Yeah, all those guys are good. This should be a great game. A lot of scoring, hopefully.
Yeah, should be a lot of scoring. Definitely some of the better games, and it sounds like Taylor Swift will be blasting in both locker rooms. Bruce, they're going to be blasting it, going with all the revenge narratives. So we'll have to see. Bruce, if you had to pick, do you like the values more or the spends? I know it's not like an easy question, but like if you were building like a lineup or two for this game, and you wanted to get exposure? Would it be more through the spends or the value plays?
I like Haynes, so I if you consider him a spend, I would. Yeah, I prefer a guy like Haynes, and then maybe a guy like McCollum on the other side. Because I mean, he's trending up. He's been good in years past. I don't know if he's been banged up a few other weeks before this, but he's such a good receiver, and they target him a ton when he's healthy.
Yeah, he looked like last week he was getting a little going. So
Yeah.
I could see a spike week coming for him. Bryce, obviously a game, I think if you want to spend on options, you want to take value plays, you want to go in the mid-tier, wherever you want, you can get exposure to this game. And of course, in your cash games, I'm sure you're going to get exposure to it. In tournaments, I'm sure you're going to want exposure to it. But how are you going to get exposure?
I mean, I'm just never on the right side of Haynes King, it seems. But, I mean, he grades out as like probably, top couple quarterback this week. There's some options up here, but it's undoubtedly a really nice spot for him, and there's gonna be a lot of people on him. I don't mind the Jamal Haynes call from Bruce. You get off like a super chalky quarterback with his running back. It's kind of like a Garrett Green, like Donaldson type of situation where he provides really solid leverage. I do like both Haynes here. Haynes King is probably more of a cash play than a tournament play to me. I just think that the pairing with him and Rutherford is going to be so owned that it's just so chalky that like there's a ton of other really good spots on the slate. So I might prefer to be under that in tournaments and like play them in cash or something like that. I think would be a solid strategy. I think Hampton goes overlooked here just because he's super expensive, and I think most people are going to spend up on Reed or Harvey just because they've been absolute animals this season. And I mean, Hampton is a great play in his own right. He gets pretty much unlimited volume, and he's just really good at football. And it's a pretty solid matchup here against Georgia Tech and what we expect to be a high scoring game. So I like him in all formats. Touched on the receivers briefly. Rutherford would be my favorite in this game, followed by Singleton. And then I think these Carolina guys are playable as well. I don't hate buying low on Jones here. I think he's a pretty explosive player, but definitely a tournament play. I would not touch him in cash. McCollum got all the targets he could handle last week. So, if that stays around for another week, I mean, he's an absolute smash at 4.6. And, we were super high on Nesbitt last week. He was super close to a big game. Missed him in the end zone twice. Backup tight end scored a touchdown. So I'm more than willing to go back to the well here with Nesbitt. This is one of the best games overall, and one of the reasons that I was lower on the first two games we discussed.
Yeah, that's what I figured. I mean, I said this could be the game of the week, or there could be other ones that are. It's close, but this one grades out, I think, as the best one on this slate when it comes to just fantasy purposes. You could argue other games, but this is definitely my number one. Let's go to the next one. It's the Gamecocks taking on the Tide. It's a high total. I'm doing the math here. It's like 54, I think, or something like that. Bruce, what do you have on the total there for that?
Let's see. I have 50.5.
Yeah, I went too high. I added 2 points there.
Saber will always have it higher for some reason. I don't know. I don't know why that is.
Yeah, that's fine. But I'm looking at the Saber stuff. So, man, Milroe is 10.8K. I think that's like the first thing we have to discuss, right? Like he's 10.8. It's an expensive price tag on him on this slate. And I mean, yeah, if you want to get him, you can, but he's going to have to, like, he's at the price where you just have to break the slate, right? He's got to drop 40 or 45 and you're still fine. But you also need to make sure the cheap quarterbacks don't drop like 30, right? Because if they do, the gap's not large enough. So he basically has to separate at the position so much at 10.8K. And I'm just not excited about it in a matchup against the Gamecocks. It just doesn't seem like it makes a ton of sense to me. Rocket Sanders, he disappointed and did not get a lot of work last week. That was frustrating. Got Ryan Williams up at 7.4K. Bernard, 4.8. I mean, there's plays in this game, but like, I just think it's a good game to be more underweight on overall. Bruce, I'll go over to you. Do you think there's a lot of plays in this one?
No, not really. I think, Milroe is going to be low owned. Anytime you can get him under 20%, I don't hate the play. But yeah, 10-8 is crazy. I don't know how you I mean, I guess there's enough value where you could fit him in. But if you're trying to play him with like a Ryan Williams at 7,400, that's a lot of your salary you're taking up there. I mean, even Jeremy Bernard at 4,800, it's still crazy. In my opinion, I think South Carolina kind of has an underrated defense. They've played some good teams. I mean, they played LSU, held Nussmeier under 300 yards passing, which is a pretty big achievement. And they played Jackson Dart last week, held him under 300 yards too. I think it's a solid defense. I think Alabama is going to be pissed off, so you could always play that narrative as well. But yeah, the team total's only at 35, so you really need everything to fall your way if you played a guy like Milroe. I don't mind a one-off of like Ryan Williams, just because he's so explosive and can score from anywhere, and then Bernard at 4,800. But other than that, I'm pretty much staying away from this one.
Yeah, I think you broke it down good with how to handle it. Bryce, do you have any takes on this game, or is it one you're just going to kind of, hey, you understand there's points going to be scored, but you're just going to move on?
Yeah, last week I had to swap my team, and I got pretty lucky with like the Trey Harris game, and then I was able to get up to Milroe at quarterback, and I was like, this is the 1 week where he does have a floor game at 25 when I haven't really played him enough this season. So that was kind of disappointing, but I do think they come out pissed off. I mean, it's just more of a salary thing as to where I'm not going to get tons of Milroe. I think he's more of a tournament play than a cash play for sure. There are cheap options, but like if you play Milroe, you can't really get another expensive player in your lineup. So I think that leads to a lot of people pairing him, if they do pair him with Bernard instead of Williams. And I get it, but like if I'm going with the pairing, I might just like go all out at it and play Williams instead of Bernard here. I think both are good pairings, but I think it's an interesting way to get a little different, just because like it's like almost 20K to play the two together. It's like 19K. So I just don't think a lot of people go there. Other than that, I don't really have any interest in this game. I don't play guys against Bama. I think it's a really, really bad spot for South Carolina here. And, I do think Bama's defense comes out embarrassed and fired up for this game. The one worry with these Bama skill guys is like the game gets out of hand. So, I mean, that's obviously a worry. I like Bama in this spot. So, it just kind of depends how they score their touchdowns. Like last week, Jan Miller got 2 on 5 carries. Like that's not really a guy I'm ever going to like chase production from. So I'm pretty out on these Bama backs and just kind of hope if you do play, it does come through the air.
All right, let's go to the next game. Clemson, Wake Forest. And I like this game a lot. I think there's a lot of good plays that we can discuss. Maffa for one, at running back 6.5K. He is going to be a really nice option. I don't know, spend up mid-tier, whatever you call it, 6.5K. He feels like he should be 7.5K. It just seems like a really good spot for him. K. Klubnik at 9K. If you want to spend on him, listen, I don't hate it. He's been amazing this season. It feels like from a fantasy perspective, running a lot more. He's looked so good out there. So I'm definitely interested in him. Then you compare all these Clemson receivers, right? You can go Williams, Wesco. There's tons of ways that you can go with it. And then Wake Forest, that's the one spot I struggle a little bit with. I think Claiborne, we saw him have a pretty good week last week. He could certainly get the job done. Don't mind him. I'm sure Bachmeier, I could see if you are, let's say you're someone that stacks up games or, like let's say you use something like Saberson where there's correlations. Well, at his price of 5.9, I just could see him getting pushed in if you're trying to jam in some really good plays. So overall, this is a solid game. I think it's more so the Clemson side though, Bruce. What about you?
Yeah, and the crazy thing is that Clemson's defense has kind of looked not good. They gave up 35 to NC State, which a lot of it was garbage time, but they just haven't looked like the same Clemson defense of years past. I think Stanford was kind of able to move the football against them too. I think you can play some of these Wake Forest guys just because I expect Clemson to win this game pretty easily, and they've given up a ton of garbage time stuff. So I think any of these guys, Klubnik, I love. I just think he's playing really well right now. If you look at points that Wake Forest has given up. They give up 30 to NC State, 41 to Louisiana, 40 to Wake Forest, and 31 to Virginia so far this year. So Clemson's going to put up some points here. Klubnik, Maffa, like you said, the receivers. Antonio Williams is 5K. Dude's just smashing this year. So I think that's way too cheap for him. Wake Forest has given up 47 points per game to receivers. They're just bad all the way around. So I think these guys are in play. Brenning Stool, Morin, TJ Moore at 3,100. Micah Mays for Wake Forest is 3K. He was in my sheet 3K shitter list. He got 7 targets last week, and he looked really good. So I think he's in play. It's a really good game. I think Claiborne is one of the better tournament plays. Just because I think this Clemson defense is overrated.
All right, Bryce, we'll go on over to you because I think it's a game you'll have some exposure to in cash games and tournaments for sure. I mean, Maffa just seems like he's one of the better plays on the board this week. What's your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I mean, Maffa is going to be the highest owned running back. I don't think there's any debate about that. He's just too cheap and kind of fits all your lineups. So, I don't think he's an absolute lock or anything. I'd probably be, at the field in tournaments, 45%. I would play him in cash this week. I just think he's a pretty easy plug and play there. Knowing that, I mean, that makes me like Klubnik. I'm not normally a Klubnik guy, but it's a super solid spot. As Bruce said, he's been playing great. And, if everyone's going to play Maffa, no one's going to play them together. I personally would not play Klubnik and Maffa together. I just don't think he's a good enough receiver out of the backfield here. He just doesn't he's caught 6 passes this season. That's just not going to get it done. I think Klubnik is super easy to pair as well. I mean, Williams is going to be high owned, but I mean, he's obviously a great pairing with Klubnik. He's way too cheap here. He should be a 6K receiver in my opinion. Brennan Stool, I think definitely goes under the radar here, and he can always pop off for a big game. Klubnik obviously likes him, so that would be kind of my favorite under the radar Clemson play. I guess I don't think he garners tons of ownership in this spot. Wake Forest, I think you can bring it back. I would only bring it back to one guy. Would probably be Morin or Claiborne. I don't think that people are going to try and chase Claiborne's absolute monster game last week. Kind of annoyed he ended up playing because, I was going to be, we as a whole were just going to be all over on Carney and gotten that absolute nuke of a game that he had last week. So I don't really think people chase that here against Clemson. So yeah, I don't mind him or Morin as run backs. Bachmeier's not my pool this week. I just don't think he has enough upside, even if Wake Forest scores 30 points here to be in the winner.
The problem I will say is if you don't take him out of the pool, he'll find his way in. He will, because if you project guys up, I'm just saying, if you are someone that when you build your teams and you like to use projections and you use SaberSim and you're not getting enough of one player, so you bump a guy up, it'll sacrifice a quarterback. I'm just saying, I don't know. Bruce, did you notice that? Have you ran your projections at all to see? You have them kind of lower, but I mean, you had Viola lower too, and he still popped.
Yeah, if I had him up any higher, yeah, he'd definitely pop. I think the cheapest quarterback that's popping is Mendoza right now, but yeah, he was popping before I lowered him down manually a little bit earlier.
I just know how it's gonna go. It's you're I really want I don't know. Let's say you want exposure to some of these lower owned expensive options we talked about, and you put them in, and then all of a sudden you just got some Bachmeier exposure. You're what the hell's going on? So it can happen. But all right, the chat's looking good. By the way, Bruce, can we talk about our guy Pavia? He got the dub last week. I mean, that was we were ahead of the curve. I just want to say that. So
he's just a gamer. That's all. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, put Vanderbilt in the playoff. Give them an automatic bid for what they did. But overall though, that was super fun to watch last week. And but yeah, let's go to the next game. The next one is Louisville and Virginia, which Louisville, Virginia is a pretty good game, I would say, on the schedule. I don't know if it's the best game, but it's definitely up there. We've definitely been investing in this Louisville passing attack for the most part. Shuck with Brooks, Lacey looked like fat Eddie Lacy last week. He was not so great, so that was brutal. There's definitely plays in this game. Like, I mean, Colin Dure, he's definitely a quarterback option at 7.9K. You can like Fields as well. Pace. I mean, there's tons of plays that you can get to. I don't think these plays are as strong as maybe some of the other ones we've talked about in the past couple games, but there's plays here nonetheless. So Bruce, break this one down for me.
Yeah, I think this one's kind of sneaky. It's a sneaky good game. Virginia is going to go fast paced. They're always pretty quick. Louisville defense has not been great. So, if they're able to score, it could speed Louisville up a little bit. Louisville's been fast in like years past, but I think with Shuck at quarterback, they've kind of slowed it down. And with the new communication in the helmets, I think the coaches have been speaking to the quarterbacks a little bit more, so it's been slowing the certain teams down that were quicker last year. But I think Shuck is one of the best plays on the slate. Virginia's terrible on defense, giving up 27 points per game to quarterbacks this year, and Shuck has 13 passing touchdowns this year. So I think he's one of my favorite quarterbacks this week, especially with the pace in that one. Isaac Brown at 4,300. I think it's a great spot for him. He's been playing really well. Played 57% of the snaps last week, back from injury, and I don't know. He just looks good. He kind of splits with Chaney in that one hole. So both those guys could get carries. Chaney's only 3,100 too, so you could play both of those guys. I don't mind him in any format. Brooks, Ja'Cory Brooks. I think he scored again last week. Just too good. Lacey failed us last week, but he did have 4 targets still. Played 58% of the snaps. It's still there. Chris Bell at 3,500 as well. Played 84% of the snaps. His opportunities there too. Big play guy, and some good value in this one with J.R. Wilson at 3K, Andre Green at 3,500. There's so much, and then Malachi Fields at 7,500. It's tough to play, but he's a slate breaker if he gets the gets most of the targets like he usually does. Guy has 3 touchdowns on the year and some huge PPR games as well.
Yeah, definitely a sneaky good game. I will say prices are going up on some of these plays. Like Shuck, for instance, like he was someone I played a lot of this year, but at 7.7K, it's getting a little tougher. He does have cheap stacking options, which will help. You do have Ja'Cory Brooks at 6.7K, though that price is going up. We got our guy Boynton in the chat. He says big weekend of games. It is a big weekend of games, so we're excited about that. And then, Bryce, I'll ask you this. You've liked Brooks a lot this year. You've talked him up. We've all talked him up. He's been a great play, but now he's 6.7K. Shuck is also 7.7. Are these prices getting a little too high for you? And then do you have any interest in Fields as well? He's 7.5K. So talk about Fields and Brooks and then break down the rest of this game.
Yeah, I mean, I like this game as a whole. I think Brooks is one of the better receiver plays in any format at receiver this week. I'm going to continue buying here until he hits 8K. I think he's viable. If you go through his games, would you take 25 points for 7.5K from a receiver? Probably. Guy just smashes every week. Shuck obviously likes him. Granted, last week it did take a big play for him to get there. He didn't really garner as much attention as he had been, but I expect his target numbers to get back to normal in this spot. It's a really good game for offense. Malachi Fields, I think, is a good, not great option. I would prefer Brooks to him straight up personally. When you take into account the price, I think he's more of a tournament play. And, I think he does go under owned here at 7.5K. So he is someone I would want to be over on, him and Brooks both. Lacey, we'll stick with the receivers. I mean, he had an absolutely awful game last week as turbo chalk. I think people might be scared to go back to the well here. I'm fine with it. He's only 3.9K. So, I think he's a pretty solid salary saver. The best salary saver in this game is Isaac Brown. He's only 4.3K. I made a mistake last week of not being a little more on him. He's a great role in the pass game, and his sack count's getting back up there. So I think he's a buy again this week. Moving to quarterback, I don't really want anything to do with the UVA running game here. Would much rather attack them through the air. I like both quarterbacks in tournaments. I think they both have a decent amount of upside here. Shuck probably a little less just because he doesn't run enough for my liking. But, as Bruce said, he has like really attractive like stacking partners. And, even at 7-7, you can get him and Brooks for, $14K. It's not the worst play in the world. I'd probably want to be 15 to 20% Shuck. I think he's a cash option as well.
Yeah, and you could stack it with the cheap running back you talked about, Brown. Like that could work.
Yeah,
too.
Brown has a good enough receiving role as to where I wouldn't take away, Shuck and Brown combos.
Yeah, and the game stack could obviously hit in a huge way. Like you take one receiver, one running back, and then Shuck, and then you could easily take UVA's quarterback with one of the receivers. Call it a day. Could certainly work out. We got our boy Mr. Town is in the chat. We'll talk about, I don't know, we'll get Bruce maybe to give an overview of the night stuff real quick. At the end of not right now, but at the end. It's obviously a good one, and he'll have the playbook up for you guys over at Run Pure Sports. So be sure to check that out. We'll have all the night slate stuff. We got all the content for you guys. Let's go to the next game that I know Bruce is super excited about. It's the Hook'em Horns versus the Sooners. Red River rivalry, 31.5 total for Texas, 21 for Oklahoma. So it's a little above 50. Points will certainly be scored here. And Quinn Ewers, he's on the slate with 9.9K. My guy, Mr. Hawkins, who can, he's going to be in a trailing script. And I don't know. I don't think he's the craziest play. The problem is 7.2K. Like, I wish it was a little cheaper. If I could get him in that low sixes, I'd probably be more intrigued. You got Blue at 7.5 as a running back option, even though there's some better plays, but I think he's in the conversation. Isaiah Bond at 5.9 looks like a pretty screaming value that you can get to. You know who I'm probably not getting to? Mr. Sawchuck. I'll say that. We don't need to play Gavin Sawchuck. It's not Gavin Sawchuck week, so we'll be passing on that. But Bruce, I don't think this is a game that we love in fantasy, but I think it's one we'll kind of get a splash of plays from.
Yeah, that's pretty much how I see it. I think this game, at least in the first half, could go kind of slower as they work Ewers back in from his injury. So, and I think Oklahoma kind of wants to run the football with Hawkins and Barnes. They don't have many receivers left here with their guy. What's his name? Deion Burke's out. Nick Anderson out. They have multiple guys out, just like they did against Auburn as well. So I don't see them throwing the football that much. Brennan Thompson is an ex-Texas receiver, 4,500. So, a little revenge narrative there if you want to play it. But I love Isaiah Bond, 5,900, under 6K. He's one of the most explosive players in college football. I think he's a great play there. Thought DeAndre Moore looked really good. Scored a couple touchdowns in their last game. Thought he looked good as well. He's only 3,900. I'm not sure if they start Blue this week. He had the fumble issues against Mississippi State. If he's ironed those out, that's great. He's a good tournament option. But I kind of like Oklahoma's rush defense. So it's still scary either way, even though he is averaging about 5 targets per game. So, but it's tough to play quarterbacks in this game. Ewers priced too high, Hawkins priced too high. I kind of just want to stick with the receiver like Bond, or maybe a value guy like Moore or Thompson. Just one of these cheaper Texas OU receivers.
Yeah, think that makes a ton of sense. I will say this is a game that I think you could stack it up. Like I could see it shooting out and just be unowned for the most part. Obviously, Bond will definitely have ownership, but you could definitely get some unowned plays in a stack for sure. Bryce, I assume Bond will be the main guy you're looking at in this game, but give me your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, Bond and Moore for sure, especially Bond. I know we've talked about Bond a good amount on this show, and in a game that matters to them, I think it could be like a showcase type of game for him. Not worried about Oklahoma's defense at all here. I think Texas absolutely rolls. I'm a little more worried that like Oklahoma's not going to be able to put up enough points to keep up with them, but hopefully Bond or Moore would have done enough by then. Echo what Bruce says about Ewers. He's just too expensive for me. First game off injury. Wouldn't surprise me if they designed a decent amount of easy passes for him. I think he's just playing because it's the Oklahoma game, which is a big game for them. It's just Oklahoma's down this year with all the injuries that they have. So their offense just is not explosive at all right now. And I definitely think that if they are able to move the ball, they're going to grind this game out for sure. I don't see Oklahoma having tons of big plays here. So, I didn't mind these Oklahoma receivers at like 3K, but like in the 4Ks, I think there's better options to go to this week. I'm likely not going to have pretty much any of them. I don't want anything to do with the Oklahoma run game. Bruce mentioned Blue's fumble issues. I think he's a solid tournament play at 7.5. Nobody's going to play him. If he gets a good amount of carries here, I don't think that. Sorry about Teo. I guess he's a Blue guy this week. He's kind of like the high risk, high reward play. If we get word that he's not starting for like his fumbling issues, I'm definitely not playing him. But if he's starting, would not surprise me if like they try and get him some work here and iron those fumbling issues out. So like him in tournaments.
All right, definitely a solid game. Let's get to the next one. It's definitely a game that I don't know. I think it's a good one, but I think it could get overlooked. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's UCF and Cincy. There's a lot of good games on this slate. I think UCF left a very bad taste in a lot of people's mouths the past couple weeks, and I just could see people just saying, not again. I'm not falling for them, and then I could see them pop off. It is Cincinnati. I'm not saying Cincinnati is this team that I'm going to avoid, but I don't think they're a team to like certainly just like attack like UNC and Pittsburgh. And again, there's a lot of good games on this slate. So curious what you guys do with Harvey at 9.2K and Jefferson at 8.9K. Clearly going to be interesting options. We got Sorsby, Henderson, and Kiner, all really strong plays. As long as Kiner plays, I think that's a big talking point that Bruce will definitely discuss with us. Of course, you got Hudson at 6.5, Royer at 3.4 as a value play. Bruce, there's clearly plays in this game. So how are you attacking this one?
Yeah, I think you're right. This could be a sneaky good game. I know I've never liked Cincy's defense. So, look, if you look at who they've played, it's not really the best offenses. I know they played Pittsburgh, I believe. Maybe. Yeah, they did. They lost by 1 point there. So, they are competitive. They held Houston to 0. They gave up 44 to Texas Tech in their last game before the bye. So Taj Brooks ran for 172. So if Taj Brooks can do it, RJ Harvey can do it. But Harvey hasn't looked great in my opinion. The last couple of weeks he's had issues. Their offensive line is still blocking really well. It's there. So maybe he's a sneaky tournament option at 9,200 because nobody's going to want to play him at that price. I see ownership projections across the industry pretty high on him, but I can't believe that it's going to be that high. I guess because he's a volume guy, but he's let a lot of people down the last few weeks for sure. I do like Sorsby here, especially if they're trailing. I think they'll have to speed it up a little bit. They are slower paced. UCF is very, very fast, one of the fastest teams in the country when it comes to pace. So if they fall behind, they could have to go a little bit faster here. And I like Sorsby, Xavier Henderson as well, Florida transfer. Joe Royer's cheap, 3,400 again. So I don't mind him. Jamoy Mays has been playing most of the snaps too at receiver, and he's 3,300. So there's some good cheap options here to like for sure. And it'd be interesting to see if Kiner's 100% as well. I think he could be an okay play as well.
All right, Bryce, this is definitely a solid game on the slate. Pretty high projection here. What's your overall thoughts?
I really like the Cincy side in tournaments here. Judging on ownership projections, like early ones, I think Sorsby Henderson combo goes super under owned here. I just think they have pretty much unlimited upside here. like Brooks and Chuck are going to be like pretty high owned in my opinion. And like these guys are like pretty much the same price pairing type of deal. I think that's a really solid tournament pivot. Obviously you can play them together. Neither combo really breaks the bank and lets you do things at other spots in your lineup. So really like that in tournaments. Don't see tons in cash here. I would, if I'm spending on a running back, like it would be Reed over Harvey pretty much every time here. I don't mind Harvey in tournaments. I think what Bruce said, he's burned so many people the last couple of weeks. Like, I don't really think people are going to get up to him at this price. He's kind of the type of guy that's like easier to like set a minimum on in like an optimizer than like actually manually click into your team. So yeah, I think he's going to go a little under-owned here for his upside. Like, I mean, if you told me Harvey broke the slate, I would not be surprised whatsoever. I'd like to get around like 20, 25% in tournaments. I think he's a really solid tournament spend. I don't see tons here in cash. Like KJ Jefferson just doesn't really do it for me. I just think he's a really crappy quarterback, and I haven't really been on him much this year. It's been more the Harvey train for me, so I'm likely going to go back to that if I'm playing any UCF. The receivers don't love here. I mean, they play super fast. Much prefer the UCF run game and the Cincy pass game.
Yeah, I think that all makes sense. And also it's a 58 total. So, and it's the same as the Pitt total. So I thought that's interesting that I noticed for sure, which we'll get to that game. Not yet. The next game up is a 51 total. It's, where is it? Oh, it's USC and Penn State. So UNC Penn State, I think there's plays here for sure. There are some expensive tags like Marks, 7.9K. I think Bruce, you got him at like a 20 projection, which he could certainly be on the winner, but there's like plays that rank out better. But I think Marks is not a bad play here. Singleton looks like he's going to play at 7K. So he's obviously we play roulette with the Penn State running backs if we want to. You got Moss at 7.5, who isn't the worst option at that projection. I mean, I think it's a tough matchup, but I think you could definitely make a case for him. The problem is if you play Moss, you got to pair him up with someone. And so who's that option going to be? Is it Lane? Is it Branch? I mean, you just kind of have to play a little bit roulette with the receivers, which isn't one of my favorite things to do. But Bruce, it's definitely a game. I think there's other games that we've had at the same total that are better games. But there's plays in this game. And I think they're going to be low owned. I don't think anyone's going to have high ownership. So what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I've gone back and forth on this one a few times, just because, man, the total has gone up 3 points since, I guess, Tuesday. It was at 48 when I filled out my sheet. Now it's at 51. So that's interesting. It's kind of trending towards, it was 4.5 for USC. Now it's 3.5. So, point total is kind of, or points have kind of went in USC's favor as well. So I just thought Penn State was going to dominate them for sure. On the defensive line, the Penn State defensive line is really, really good. It gets crazy pressure on the quarterback. Their havoc rate is almost 15%, and USC can't block anything. So I think that's a problem for Miller Moss, who's been banged up a little bit. I know he got banged up against Michigan. So I think he could have some problems there in this game. I'd be surprised if he makes it all the way through without at least getting nicked up a little bit. So they're going to have to run the football, I think. But Penn State's defensive line has been good. I just think there's problems here for USC. They're going to have to get the ball out quick. There's some 3K guys, 3K receivers I like in this game. Mekhi Lemon is 3K, and I think he's probably one of the better receivers on USC's team, and he plays in the slot. They're going to have to get it out quick to him. Played 53% of the snaps last week at 4 targets. I think he's solid. And Tyler Warren for Penn State, 5,300. Plays almost every snap as well. One of the best tight ends in football. I think he's a good play. And Jacoby Lane, he kind of let people down last week, but he still had 8 targets, played most of the game. And like you said, you can play roulette with these Penn State running backs, Singleton and Allen. They have a big edge on the line, one of the best blocking offensive lines in football against Penn State that's giving up 27 points per game to running backs.
Yeah, I mean, if you told me I could roster, I know, sure, you could do this with any team, but if you told me I could roster one running back, like just a combination of the running back room this week, I would love to roster the Penn State running back room. Like they're going to run all over USC. The problem is, I don't know, the guessing game, right? I don't know what to do with it. Singleton, he's 7K, certainly can have a big game. If you look at his game logs, I mean, lowest game is 18.3, highest game is 29. Allen, he's another option that, hey, he's at double digits pretty much every single game. He's only 6K. So yeah, I think if I had to pick one, it'd probably be Singleton. And Bryce, I doubt you're playing much of this game. It just feels like the range of outcomes is too wide, where it makes sense to play in tournaments, but there's definitely some low floors in this game.
Yeah, I don't think anyone here is playable in cash. Cash is just a super simple fade. In tournaments, I don't really like USC. I'm still a big believer in this Penn State defense. Bruce highlighted their issues on offense, and it just doesn't pair up well against an absolute monster of a defensive line. I think I would lean more into the Penn State side if you're playing tournaments. I'd be fine taking a shot on Allen at running back. Singleton at 7K is a little too much for me. Don't really want to go there with his injury concerns. I know he was held out last game as a precaution, and we kind of thought that could happen, but there's no really telling how healthy he actually is, and they do have another good back, so I would just rather go to that other back. Their receivers, Warren's kind of the engine of this offense, and he's not a receiver. He's 5.3K, which I think is a little steep for him, so I don't really think anyone's going to be on him. I do think he has upside here. Don't hate him as like a pivot off of some of the chalkier 5K guys. Drew Aller, he scored some running TDs this week or these past couple weeks. Short yardage stuff only, really. I don't love the upside for him here in this spot. I would rather just kind of play like one-offs, but he would be like fringe, like guy I would cut from my pool entirely. Even if I did play him, I'm not going to have a lot.
All right, let's get to the game that I want to talk about. The 58 total, Pittsburgh, and I'm blanking on the team for some reason. Oh, Cal. Yes, Pittsburgh and Cal. This is definitely the game. Jaden Ott, I want to talk about him first because he has been expensive all year and hasn't really been great, right? He's been overall pretty much a frustrating roster. Jaden Ott looked a lot better last week. I think he had, what was it? He had 2 touchdowns. Didn't have to do as much against Miami because they were cruising and then Miami came back. I mean, you could argue this is a really good spot for Jaden Ott to have his best week. And you're getting the lowest price discount that we've had all season at 7.7K. So Ott is definitely someone to discuss. Holstein's priced at 9.7K. Is that too high or is it still right? I mean, he's got a really good projection from you, Bruce, almost at 31 at 9.7K. Desmond Reed, he's 9.4K, which that I know he's the guy there, but that is definitely pricey now. Like 9.4K, you're going to have to do a lot at this price tag. Mumfield at 5.8 seems like a good value. So does Mendoza, Bruce. You talked about that earlier. So talk about that value play. And then all these receivers. You could play Williams. You could play Johnson. You could play Grizzle in there if you wanted to. There's so many plays in this game, Bruce. So break it all down for me.
Yeah, this should be a very popular game. I see ownership up there quite a bit. It's crazy if you look at Cal's schedule. They've been at home to start. Then they had to fly to Auburn, Alabama, then back home, then to Florida State, then back home, and now flying back to Pittsburgh. That's I can't believe that they agreed to be in the ACC, and that's their life now. But that's just the way it is. That's a lot of travel. You would think that would start to take effect at some point. Maybe it hit the second half of that Miami game because man, I went to bed near the end of it, and I just thought, okay, well, they've got it sewed up here, and woke up to the exact opposite. So, yeah, I think they have some problems with Pitt's offense as well. They Holstein is just in a great spot. I think that price is justified. He's been throwing for 300 yards almost every week, and he has good receivers as well. You can easily pair with them. They're still cheap, still way too cheap. It's just a lot of times it's hard to find the right one. I think most of these weeks it's been Desmond Reed, and he's priced up to 9,400 this week. It is a tough matchup, but Cal has still been giving up 21 points per game to running backs. You mentioned Jaden Ott. He didn't look great as a running back, but as a receiver last week, he had 70 yards receiving. I think he had 7 carries for 2 yards and a touchdown. So
Yeah.
that's tough, but that Miami rush defense is pretty solid, so that may be a little deceiving. But
Bruce, they were up so much early where I think they shouldn't have, but they took their foot off the gas a little bit, and then it just kind of came back to bite them.
Exactly, and they have Javian Thomas there as well. He got 50% of the snaps too, so maybe Ott's not 100% yet. I know he's had that. I don't know if it's an ankle or hamstring. It's something with his leg. But he may not be 100% yet. But one of these weeks he's going to have a breakout. He's just priced up too much for me for a guy that's just still getting less than 50% snaps. But he is looking better, so got to keep that in mind when building your tournament lineups. I think Mumpfield is too cheap here. Between him and Bond, it's going to be tough for me to choose there. Might end up playing both. I don't know. And then Poppy Williams at 4,400, Kenny Johnson at 3,600 just hasn't done a ton. Sincere Lee seems to be getting more playing time. I know he caught a touchdown last week, maybe 2. I can't remember, but he looked good, and he's only 3,400. Got 41% of the snaps. In a game that mattered, he's had been getting like some garbage time run as well. So I think maybe he's earning more trust in the offense there. So on the Cal receiver side, I think Hunter is solid, 5,300. Injuries and Deichus are both cheap, 32 and 3,100. Both those tight ends get a lot of work. Deichus had 82% of the snaps last week and 3 targets. So if you want a good punt, I think he's solid there.
All right, definitely a game that I'm gonna want to get exposure to for sure. I don't know if it's like we talked about it last week, that UNC and Pitt game maybe get exposure to at least one in this game. I don't know if it goes that far, Bryce, but it's definitely a good game. So talk about this one because I'm sure you're gonna have a lot of exposure to it.
It's a little tougher this week with Pitt priced absolute through the roof. Not really sure it's possible to play Holstein and Reed and get like a playable rest of your team type of deal on. I mean, you would need multiple receiving touchdowns for that to work out for you. I just don't think that's a super likely outcome, so I'd likely separate them. I do think they're super high upside spends. I think Holstein is borderline cash viable. I mean, just look at this guy's game log. I mean, he's the epitome of what you want in like a fantasy quarterback. He runs, he throws. It's just a really quarterback friendly offense. So don't mind him here. I think Mendoza's a decent punt. He's pretty much as cheap as I'd go. I think Bruce mentioned that earlier in the show, but I don't love him or anything. It's just, he's cheap and he gets to face Pitt is pretty much what to like there. So don't mind him. He's probably my favorite Cal exposure. I don't really want Ott in the spot, even against Pitt. I just don't think he's healthy. For this price, I think you're going to need more. And Ott's always been a great player if he gets the volume, but if he's not getting the volume, I don't think he's anything special. I'd rather sacrifice to get up to Reed in pretty much all the teams that I would have Ott in. Receiver wise, I think Mumfield's the best player in this game by a mile. I think he's kind of like the alpha receiver in this offense, and then everyone else is kind of a little behind him. That being said, I mean, all these guys are primed for a good game. I think Holstein sees a good amount of success here. I can see Poppy Williams. Kenny Johnson's kind of the guy that's fallen by the wayside a bit with Lee kind of like rising up a bit. They play Bartholomew at tight end pretty much every play. So it's like always 3 receivers. So there's going to be one left out of these 4 receivers. And I kind of think that's Kenny Johnson here. So I'm likely the lowest on him of the Pitt receivers. I think they're all good plays though. Mumfield would be my favorite. Cal receivers are way harder for me. Daichis, 3.1K. I think he's a solid punt. Bruce mentioned him. Hunter, 5.3K. I think is a pretty solid play. It's just like I would much rather have like a Mumfield over him like every day of the week. I know they're not the same price, but yeah, Hunter would be much more of a tournament play for me.
Yeah, the pit receivers, I think you summed it up really good. Mumfield's clearly the play. Poppy Williams is the pivot. And then the other two, it's like Leon Johnson. It could change every week and it wouldn't be surprising. But right now it looks like it's the lead, but it's just, whatever. But that's because they run that. Because they run that tight end. But Stanford and Notre Dame, let's go to that game next. Not a game that I am going to love getting too much exposure to. I do see, if you need a value, I guess Daniels, I don't know. He's projecting okay on your stuff, Bruce. I don't know. We'll have to see. Not Aylmeyer, however you say his name, Ellick. He's 5.7K. He seems like not a terrible option in the mid-tier for sure, but I don't know, Bruce. I think there's guys that look like they can project okay, but I don't really want to play anyone in this game. What about you?
Yeah, and it's at Notre Dame. So I think it's a tough matchup for Stanford. It looks like Daniels will be back. I know he missed last game, and they look terrible on offense with Lamson playing quarterback. But yeah, he is 5,400 and he runs 11 rushes per game. Just wonder how healthy he is for sure. I think Riley Leonard is an interesting tournament option. Well, actually, he's going to be kind of owned. Just looking at it, I didn't realize he was going to be that high owned. But Stanford runs a lot of man defense. Is the reason why I kind of like drones last weekend, even though he failed. Leonard played against Purdue earlier in the year, who runs a lot of man as well, and went nuts against them, but it was Purdue. So kind of take that with a grain of salt. But other than that, I think Jeremiah Love is interesting at home. Going to be unowned, and it's just a good player. Stanford's rush defense has been good, but they're traveling a long way here. So I think I'll limit myself to some Leonard and some Love here.
All right, Bryce, any interest in this game?
I think Leonard's pretty much the play for me in this game. He's not super expensive. Like, I mean, AK is not like cheap, but it's not like 10K. He runs a ton. And, as Bruce said, Stanford has a man defense with a defensive line that's good against running backs. I mean, I think it's like a spot that profiles pretty well for Riley Leonard in a vacuum here. He just looks to run every play, and he's pretty much the goal line back. Love, I would include in tournaments. I would definitely not play him and Leonard together. So just kind of a rule to make there. Don't really like any of these Notre Dame receivers. If you did want to run it back with the Stanford guy, and I don't think that's necessary whatsoever, it would be Ao Manor. I mean, I think the guy's talented. He's just had a slightly underwhelming season from what we expect from him, but it's not like he's breaking the bank here at 5.7. So don't mind him as a run back.
All right, last game of the slate. I believe it's a 48 total. It's Arizona and BYU, and Arizona definitely has plays that we consider all the time. We got McMillan, 8.5K, really good projection. Conley, 7.1K, and then of course Fifita, he is 6.5K. He's definitely a value that you could get to and pair up with these expensive options if you want to. BYU, I don't always play a lot of them. I mean, Roberts at 4.8K and Martin at 10.6. Those guys look like solid values here against Arizona, which I'm not scared of their defense at all. Bruce, I don't think we're jamming this game, but I think we have some interest, though. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I have some interest just because there's some good values, like a guy like Darius Lassiter at 4,200. He's getting tons of targets ever since he's came back from injury. I think last week he had about 8 targets, and he just looks like the guy. I think he's looked great, and Arizona's pass defense isn't good this year, so I think he could have a big game along with Chase Roberts. Both of those guys are cheap under 5K, and I posted in the chat earlier this week that Arizona's missing 2 of their starting secondary as well. So could see those guys have a big game. I don't have any interest in the Arizona or BYU running backs just because everybody's healthy. They have LJ Martin back, Potty back as well. So it should be like 5 or 6 deep there at running back. So no interest there. Have a little bit of interest in Fafita. It is at BYU, and that's a tough place to play. But him and McMillan can go off any week. So have a little bit of interest there. But yeah, mostly the BYU receivers. I just think they have a big game. Arizona's just missing so much there, and it looks good for them for sure.
All right, Bryce, final game of the slate, Arizona BYU. Any thoughts here?
I think it's kind of weird that they included this game in the slate, just being like a 4 p.m. type of outlier. But if it's here, we'll play it. I think like a mini game stack with receivers only kind of makes sense here. Like you play McMillan and then like run one of the BYU guys, Roberts and Lassiter. They're both solid plays. I would probably prefer Darius here, but that's kind of a personal preference type of thing. I just think he's a more explosive player than Roberts, though. They do use Roberts in like different ways, though. So I do prefer Darius here. McMillan, it's not the best matchup, but the guy's an absolute animal. All you have to do is scroll down his game logs a couple games and you see a 65 spot on the board. Just goes to show you how much upside this guy has week in and week out. I know Big T is definitely going to be on his guy this week, I would think. He absolutely loves McMillan. Don't want anything to do with the running backs here. It's kind of a hard pass for me. I think it's a really tough matchup for the Arizona guys, and Bruce touched on the BYU backfield mess here, so I don't really want anything to do with that. Retzlaff, I don't think he's the worst tournament play. I do think BYU had some success here. I would definitely pair him with at least one of these receivers, if not both. Like they're cheap, kind of like a Shucks situation as to where like I kind of like his pairings more than I like the actual quarterback. And then Fafita, I think it's fine. I would prefer Mendoza for cheap. Like if you're asking me like just straight up, but if he makes sense in your game stack, you can obviously go to Fafita here. But like I would prefer to play McMillan naked than play Fafita here. But if he fits and you have some BYU players as well, I would just play him more on like overstacked situations.
Yeah, one reason you probably play Mendoza over Fafita is like if you're playing Fafita, you're probably playing like the expensive options with him, and it's just like that's not the whole point. The whole point of a punt quarterback is just to go get the cheap guy to help make things work. So, all right, that will wrap it up. We got to go plays of the day though for you guys, and if you could please hit that like, we would appreciate it. And of course, check out all the content we got. Bruce will have the playbook and everything like that for you guys. So be sure to check that out. I guess Bruce, before we do our plays of the day, give the people a quick rundown of tonight, and then tell them the games that are on for the night slate. They can check out your playbook, but let them know the big games that we'll be watching for that.
Yeah, the main attraction tonight is UNLV and Utah State. Utah State is playing no defense, and UNLV has a really good offense. Both teams are kind of fast paced too, so that could be an interesting one. That's going to be the most popular one for sure because these other two totals are in the mid 40s with Northwestern and Maryland. I think that game's kind of sneaky just because I like the new Northwestern quarterback, and Maryland has two of the best receivers in the Big Ten, and Felton and I can't remember the other guy's name. Prather. There we go. Prather. So I think both of those guys could have big games. Kind of Prather at least be sneaky. He's kind of turned it on lately. So, and then you have Utah and Arizona State. I think that game's just going to be slow. They have Scatterboo, but Utah's good at defending the run. So, yeah, mainly going to stick to UNLV and Utah State, and then sprinkle some Northwestern Maryland in there too.
Yeah, definitely going to be a fun set of games tonight. And then, of course, the night games, we got Ohio State, Oregon, Ole Miss, LSU. There'll be tons of really good games on. So be sure to check that out with the night slate. We'll have all that content up for you guys. Is the Bruce, did you look at how's like the late night slate? I know we always do that playbook. I always do stuff with you on that. Is that a good slate or no?
Yeah, Kansas State and Colorado is on the late night slate, and Hawaii is playing. Oh man, it slipped my mind. That's usually the last playbook I do of the week, but I kind of preliminarily looked at it, and they're playing Boise State, and Gene T is 11K. So
is he?
It's yeah. I can't wait to jam. It's going to be tough with all those Colorado receivers. And Sanders and Gene T. It's rough, but yeah, you mentioned the late slate.
That's a fascinating slate because Jainty's 11-4 and Hunter is 10K, which is crazy.
Yeah, it makes for some interesting builds for sure. You have to punt off a couple spots to get dudes in for sure. But yeah, you mentioned the late slate as well. I've been looking forward to this Mississippi LSU game for weeks here, and yeah, hopefully it lives up to the hype because both teams play no defense and go fast and can pass the football. So I hope it's going to be a good one.
Yeah, actually, I just did it for fun. I know this is like the super late night slate that you and I always are grinding out, but Sanders, Hunter, and Jainty. If you play all three, Bruce, how much salary do you think you're left with?
3.8.
Yeah, it's 3.9 per position, so it's like absurd.
Okay.
It's just like that'll be a fun slate. But all right, that will wrap it up for us. Oh no, we have the plays of the day. So we can't do that yet. Bro, I'll go first actually because I already know my play of the day. It's in that Pitt game. It's in Pitt Cal. It's a pivot. It's Mr. Poppy Williams. I'm going to take him as a pivot off of Mumfield. I still like Mumfield too. Don't get me wrong. I'll have a lot of exposure to him, but I do think at low ownership, Poppy Williams is a really good tournament play. Bruce, I'll go over to you next. Who do you got for your play?
I'm going to go Jamal Haynes. It went so great for me the first time I picked him as my play of the day. I'm going to go back.
All right, Haynes it is. I figured that was going to be yours when you talked about him early on. Bryce, you're up next. Who's your play?
I would say Maffa, but he's going to be so popular that I will give you guys Antonio Williams instead.
All right, in that Clemson game, which is definitely a good one for sure. That's going to wrap it up for us. We got to get on out of here. Bruce has to get all the content going for the college football weekend and get ready to watch these games. Me and Bryce got to do the cash show for you guys, so we'll be breaking that one down shortly here. But that's going to wrap it up for us. For me, Mango, Bruce, and Bryce. We'll see you guys later.
What's up? I'll be getting on in like 5 minutes.
It's still live. Hold on. Let me get this off.
Oh, you're good.